the most beautiful thing was a elbow he did in England once he fight in the cage. Yeah, he threw the punch in the guy, elbow up, bell up. That was.
Silva asserting his world dominance here as champion. And it's over. It's over. Elbow. Superb. This is why this man is middleweight champion.
Anderson Silva is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, middleweight in the history of UFC, who at one time simply effortlessly disassembled everyone whom Dana White threw at him. But it was his aura of invincibility that played a cruel joke on him. Chris Weidman managed to break Silva's dominance and in fact ended Spider's career, since after that there were injuries, failed doping tests and one victory in 6 years, which of course spoiled his great legacy a little. Today we will remember the entire early fighting path of Anderson Silva, who at one time managed to appear on various continents and participate in various tournaments, from the harsh Brazilian fights along the Vale Tudo to the crowded arenas of Pride. Silva began his fighting path with Taekwondo and Jiu-Jitsu, and then became interested in Muay Thai while studying at the legendary Shooto Academy, which brought up more than one champion. The debut for Silva took place in 1997 at the Brazilian BFC tournament. The Spider won 2 fights in the evening, and if he didn't experience any special problems with Raimundo Pinheiro, he choked him at the 2nd minute, then in the final he had to work for quite a long time, and only at the 26th minute he managed to stop the 18-year-old Jitsa Fabricio Camões. After this victory, the Spider didn't fight until 2000, and on his return he fought against another Shooto fighter, Luis Azeredo, in a Machiavelli Tudo tournament. In this fight, Lewis didn't behave quite normally for a basic kickboxer and Shooto fighter. He tried to repeat something from the Kama Sutra, and the whole first round his balls were on the head of Silva, whom Lewis was keeping down easily. In the 2nd round, the Spider decided to fight back in a stance, but Lewis dived at his feet and again moved Silva down, where he held until the very end of the fight. So his plan for the fight worked out perfectly, and in the end he took the victory by decision of the judges, which was perhaps the biggest achievement of his entire career. Jose Barreto didn't have the strength to take the Spider down, and following the example of Azeredo, controlled to death, and in the stance he had very little chance against Silva, so a kick to the head and a knockout at the beginning of the 2nd minute of the round, as a natural outcome of this fight. The same misfortune befell Claudio Fontenelle, who represented some kind of outlandish style of Joe Grettai. He also couldn't move the Spider to canvas, for which knees of all calibers flew into him. At first it was a flying one, and then according to the classics, fatality from the tie clinch. So Claudio only lasted 4.5 minutes, after which Silva celebrated another early victory. Having gone to the Japanese Shooto organization and having beaten Tatsuya Kato by the decision, Spider returned to Brazil, where he got the student of Marco Ruas, Israel Albuquerque, on his own head. And if the Brazilian of a normal person tries to choke from this position, then the Spider destroys with his elbows and makes Israel surrender from blows, and such a surrender is considered the most humiliating. Only in August 2001, the Spider finally got along with a fighter with a name. It turned out to be Hayato Sakurai, who by that time was the Shooto middleweight champion with a record of 18 wins and 0 losses, while he had the scalps of Frank Trigg and Carlo Uno. Each of them fought for the UFC championship belt. In the first round, Sakurai brought Spider down several times and controlled on the canvas, while not trying to finish much. But at the end of the 2nd round, the Spider turned on to the fullest. After a series of accurate hits in the stance, he ended up behind the opponent's back and from the back mount began to bomb the champion's pumpkin, and then held a submission but didn't have time to choke Hayato as the gong sounded. In the third round, Sakurai took Anderson to the ground and controlled him on the canvas for half a round, but didn't cause much damage. At the same time, the Spider took the ending and won this fight by unanimous decision, becoming the new Shooto middleweight champion and the first who managed to beat Hayato Sakurai. Upon returning to Brazil, the Spider, with the help of a beautiful sweep, nailed Roan Carneiro, and having brought his record to 8 wins and 1 loss, received an invitation to the Pride. Ironically, the Spider's first opponent in the Pride was Alex Stiebling, a fighter who was nicknamed the Brazilian Killer, and out of 14 fights he couldn't win only 1, losing to Mark Hughes by decision. This fight started with a quick reconnaissance with single punches, and then Anderson planted twice a juicy 1-2 into the head of Stiebling. This powerful counter kick from the Spider didn't stop Alex from moving the fight to canvas, but let him continue it. Since due to a deep cut, the referee stopped the fight and the Spider won his first victory in Pride. His second fight could have been just as short, but Japanese fighter Alexander Otsuka managed to get out of what seemed a hopeless triangle and stayed in the game. The Spider tried to submit Otsuka throughout the fight and went to the submission several times, but Alex showed good defense and brought the fight to the decision of the judges, who unanimously gave the victory to Silva. At the Pride 25 tournament, a more serious guy was thrown to the Spider. It was the former UFC champion, Canadian Ronin Carlos Newton, who at that time was probably considered one of the best grapplers in the world. Carlos managed to take Silva to canvas pretty quickly and took side control and then full mount, so things were very bad for Spider. When Silva managed to close the guard, he tried to carry out the same sweep that brought him victory in the fight against Carneiro, but it didn't work with Newton. When the referee pulled the fighters to their feet, Silva caught the moment and flew into Newton's head with a flying knee, after which there was hard finishing and the referee's stoppage. What happened to Silva in the next fight could have ended his career, as he took this fiasco too much to heart and doubted whether he could succeed in fights. It was a duel against Japanese fighter Dayu Takase, who was a clear underdog and by that time had only 4 wins and 7 losses.
Oh, nice triangle choke, he's going to get it. Anderson's side, yeah. Takase should breathe. Anderson's going to get out. He does!
This defeat from the Japanese broke Silva and made him doubt himself, but the Minotauro Nogueira helped him not to quit fighting, who encouraged the Spider to train together, and 2 years later gave him a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. And in the future, it was Silva who also helped Nogueira move to UFC after Pride crashed. Anderson left Pride for exactly a year, during which time he won 2 fights by decision in less popular leagues and went to fight in England. It was a championship fight for the Cage Rage middleweight belt against a very cold but interesting guy. His name is Lee Murray, nicknamed Lightning. This is a fighter who, according to rumors, knocked out Tito Ortiz at the club being drunk, and then received a contract with UFC for this. And after our fight with Silva, he organized one of the largest bank robberies in history and carried out about $70 or even $90 million.
When's the last time you saw something like this at nose?
Oh, good kick by Silva. He's rocking.
At the first minute, Silva shocked Murray with a high kick and then moved him to the ground with a hook. It didn't work to hold the Lightning on the canvas, and the Spider decided to make frog's feet out of the opponent's feet, breaking them with powerful stomps by the net. At the same time, in this fight, it was curious that even though Silva was superior to Murray in striking, he didn't want to fight him in a stance, and at very opportunity moves the opponent to the ground. At the beginning of the second round, there was a small exchange, after which the Spider again tried to make a takedown, not wanting to chop with Murray, who, by the way, a year earlier knocked out another Brazilian shooter boxer, Jose Landy Jones. Lee acted too predictably and seemed to rely on his right overhand, which Spider had seen all the way from Brazil. So this meeting went through all 3 rounds, and as a result, Anderson Silva won by unanimous decision and became the new Cage Rage middleweight champion, while Murray soon committed his historic robbery and went on the run. On the waves of joy, the Spider returned to Pride, but to his great surprise again failed. This time he ran into another Japanese, Ryo Chonan, who wasn't such a big underdog as Takashi, but also managed to surprise.
Oh, look at this! Whoa, this is good! Unbelievable! This is beautiful! This is amazing!
Chonan performed scissors and finished the fight with a heel twist, thereby putting an end to Spider's performances in Japan. Because after this defeat, Anderson no longer fought in the Pride. Silva returned to Cage Rage to defend his belt against Jorge Rivera, who apparently didn't want to be in the cage that night, as for most of the fight he was just blocking punches and letting the Spider do whatever he wanted. As a result, a knockout and the first successful defense for Silva.
Baixo, no corner vermelho. Vai sentindo ali, o Negão sentiu o baço, hein? O Negão sentiu o baço.
After having a pro boxing fight and knocking out Julio Cesar, Anderson made his second defense of the Cage Rage belt against Curtis Stout, who was a very powerful puncher with a crazy left hook. Curtis resembled Manhoef not only in appearance but also in his explosiveness, so the Spider decided to immediately take him down and cool him there. Almost the entire round he was held on canvas, and at the end of this, Silva finished Curtis with a series of amplitude hard blows and defended his champion's belt. After this victory, Anderson took part in the welterweight Grand Prix which took place in Hawaii in the Rumble in the Rock organization, and another Japanese, Yushin Okami, became his opponent.
Giving him no respect. Anderson Silva has been disqualified.
Okami became the last Japanese who managed to win the fight against the Spider. Spider went on a long and very exciting journey to UFC, where he became a real legend and won 16 victories in a row, holding the belt from 2006 to 2013. So even despite the vague performances at the end of his career, a place in the Hall of Fame is definitely guaranteed. This was the path of Anderson Silva to UFC, where he sometimes stumbled on the Japanese heroes, which not everyone had heard of at all, and then burst into UFC and made a rustle there that the echo is heard to these days. Well, that's all for today. If you liked the video, leave likes, subscribe to the channel and press the bell so as not to miss new videos. See you all soon.